I'm still thinking about will and determinism and the various variations on that. And I think one of the difficulties that people have, including myself, that humans have, in accepting something like hard determinism, which I don't entirely accept myself, but accepting that, or something like super determinism, which I think is probably Fritjof Capra or somebody like that said it, the idea that there's only one thing happening and we're all irrevocably welded to that thing, it doesn't feel like that. You know, this is what Pyrrho was talking about. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like we're making choices. It feels like every step we take is under our intentional control, and at any point we can decide to take a step to the left. And that's undoubtedly how it feels. But it would feel like that, wouldn't it, I think? And I guess a kind of refusal to accept the complexity of that, in the same way that people used to refuse to accept the age of the Earth. You know what I mean? The idea that the White Cliffs of Dover could possibly be made up of millions and millions of years of laying down of tiny calciferous organisms, the shells of tiny organisms. You know, people look at that gobsmacked by it and think, no, that can't be right. There must have been a god or something that did it. I think it's the same kind of inability to accept complexity and scale that lies behind at least some of this. You know, because if you accept something like determinism, even if the softer versions of it, you would have to accept that it would include the things I'm saying now, for example, and it would have to include my ability to plan for the future, and that planning for the future, that whole process, as being as equally preordained and as equally determined as the thing that's happening to me right now, as as every other deterministic operation that takes place, and all of the prevarication and the thought processes and the apparent choices, all of which seem so kind of febrile and so variable and fine textured and so enormous in number. You think, oh no, that couldn't possibly be determined by any kind of physical process. There must be some kind of magic man pushing the buttons and steering me to the left, or making a plan down and allowing me to move towards it. You know, it's I think it's an example of the imagination being boggled and coming up with some kind of human scale interpretation. But I can kind of imagine it by analogy, not fully, but I can kind of imagine what kinds of things would happen. You know, I'm thinking of things like streams and whirlpools. You know, because this process that I've got going here, where I'm being self-reflexively aware of my own thought processes right now, and I'm articulating ideas to do with free will, kind of in the knowledge that this articulation is also determined, and kind of in the knowledge that my saying it's kind of in the knowledge is also determined. You know, so it's a little kind of loop going on there. But I can imagine that if I'm thinking of streams and whirlpools, a very, very complex stream and a very complex little whirlpool forming around my brain, which is a complex organ, let's be honest, a little swirling around there, allowing me to play this, well, not allowing me, but just causing the sensation of my interpretation of this set of probably completely determined events as if they are not that, as if they are a reflection upon, when actually it's just the swirling around of the cognitive carousel, really. So I'm thinking of other ways to visualise this. I'll have to try to draw this at some point. But I'm kind of imagining train sets, a couple of train sets. You know, I imagine trains, just simple ones that run in circles. And the trains that go around these two train sets have got carriages, and each carriage has got something like a fairground ride on it. You know, it's like a train that carries a fairground from one city to the next. And these trains just go round and round with these little fairgrounds on the back of their carriages. But the fairgrounds are in motion, so there's one that's like a carousel going that way, isn't it? Yeah. And there's another that's like a big wheel, so it's going that way, turning that way. And there's another one that's like a waltzer, so it's doing this kind of figure of 8 motion. And these things are all happening whilst this train is going around in circle, while the one next to it is going around in circle with a similar fairground. So the motion of each of these carousels and fairground rides is quite complex. But in addition to that, on each seat of the fairground ride, each seat of the carousel, on the back of each horse, and on each seat of the waltzer, and each seat of the big wheel that's going round, there's a video camera just pointed out, and next to it on the seat is a monitor which is picking up the feed from another video camera. So this thing is in a constant swirl of video cameras and monitors, and of course as it goes around sometimes it'll pick up, the camera will pick up the monitor of another that's on another seat, or maybe even on the other train on the opposite track, or maybe on the fairground ride in the next carriage. And when that happens you get that weird little visual feedback going on, and sometimes it goes on with across 3 or 4 different fairground rides. 3 or 4 different cameras pick up on 3 or 4 different monitors and send this fleeting image flashing across these monitors. So what you get there is you start to get it's completely determined, because every moment in that machinery is completely determined. The train goes at a determined pace, and each fairground ride goes at a determined pace. And so of course, in theory, every single image on every single monitor is completely predictable. But at the same time, it's a massive version of the three-body problem, isn't it? Which is a problem in astrophysics, I think. Determining the various forces that are at play when you've got 3 bodies moving around one another according to gravity. It would be like a massive version of that. So although in principle it's all predetermined and understandable, in practice it would be a series of recursive loops and visual feedback and feedback on feedback that it would effectively be impossible to predict, impossible to guess how it would work out. We are all strange loops on that fairground. That's what I think. Imagine ourselves to be paying our money and taking the ride, but we're not, we're just part of the ride. Oh.